John DeVore. Welcome to the DeVore Fidelity YouTube channel. Today is a record review and guilty pleasure. This is guilty pleasure number 3, I think. This guilty pleasure is my love of being wrapped up and absorbed in completely over-the-top, overly long, overly self-indulgent, noodly rock. And sort of the sweet spot of this big category is kind of in the 70s. So, without further ado, the first one is one of those that I hinted about in my 45s video. It is the flagship track on Kansas Left Overture, great album name, Carry On My Wayward Son. It is a ridiculous classic rock chestnut that just has incredible playing. The song itself is sort of like a flawless song. I mean, it's sort of too good for its own sake in that it, I don't know. Anyway, utterly self-indulgent, utterly awesome. I love that song. Guilty pleasure. The next one, from my hometown-ish, the most self-indulgent track on Boston's first album, and it is the provocatively named Foreplay/Long Time. And as offensive as that sounds, the lyrics suggest that Long Time is not referring to. Anyway, it is guitar god Tom Scholz and his utterly groundbreaking guitar work on here. Just, his guitar sounds like synthesizers, but it isn't. Brad Delp's monster vocal pipes on this, and the drummer Sib Hassan, who doesn't get a lot of credit and is definitely not a flashy drummer, but is so tasty and just really great sort of start-stop fills. Excellent. Speaking of drummers, I purposely eliminated live albums from this particular video because live albums have tons and tons and tons. They tend to almost always be self-indulgent. So I ruled those out. And for the most part, drum solos didn't make the cut. And that is because a lot of drum solos, most drum solos, you know, the classic John Bonham or Neil Peart drum solos, they essentially stop the song. Everyone else stops. In some cases, they leave the stage. And the drummer just goes on and on and on and on, and then the rest of the band comes back on the stage, and then they go back into the song. And that, for me, doesn't work as well as a drum solo that is perfectly integrated into the piece, and where the other musicians don't just stop. And the best example of that, of all time, has to be Steve Gadd's astonishing multiple drum solos in the title track of this record, Asia. Steve Gadd rewrote the book on rock and pop drumming, and this is his most self-indulgent outing. There's tons of Steve Gadd on Paul Simon, on Ricky Lee Jones. I mean, he was all over the place in the 70s. But this track is the one where he was unleashed, and it is bonkers. Totally nuts. The next one is kind of an interesting one. So many videos back on one of my live album reviews, I talked about Rush Moving Pictures. And I sort of slighted Alex Lifeson, the guitar player for Rush. And my cabinet maker next door, who was a fantastic guitarist himself, corrected me and presented me with this record and told me to listen to the last track on side 1, Necromancer, which is a big 3-part piece. And so I did, but I wanted to hear the rest of it. So I sort of listened to the rest of it, and I almost didn't make it. I had to listen through I Think I'm Going Bald. But when I got to the Necromancer, I immediately knew what he was talking about. Guilty pleasure in that there's a lot of corniness in here, but that piece, and in particular Alex's guitar playing, is stunning. Indulgent and awesome. Highly recommend it. And this is one that I did not know about. So thank you, Anthony. The next one is another legendary prog band. Where would indulgent rock be without Yes? And on this one we have Just absolutely killer guitar work from Steve Howe. And the track I'm talking about is Awaken, which is the last track on this record. And it is awesome. It is double digits in length. And aside from Steve Howe's excellent guitar work, this is also the first record where the original keyboardist from the band, the cape-wearing Rick Wakeman, comes back. And for Awaken, for the track Awaken, they actually sent him a couple of blocks away into a church to play the beautifully restored church organ in there. And then, this is the 70s, so they rented a direct phone line from the church to the studio, and they were able to track Rick Wakeman playing a full-scale pipe organ in its church and record it along with the other members that were in the studio a couple of blocks away. And it's awesome. Completely awesome. I think it's my favorite Yes track, and it is certainly my favorite Indulgent Yes track. Totally worth it. The next one is one of the greatest guitar solos of all time, and one of the least appreciated guitar solos by one of the greatest guitarists of all time. And that is the amazing Eddie Hazel and his guitar solo on the opening track of Funkadelic Maggot Brain. And it is the title track, Maggot Brain, which is a completely epic, almost entirely guitar solo. Oftentimes, David Gilmour's Comfortably Numb is cited as sort of the greatest guitar solo of all time in that melodic, beautiful sense, in that non-flex, non-shredding sense. This predates it by many years and has all of that in it. It's not as studio perfect as Comfortably Numb, but it is raw and at least as awesome. An utterly essential guitar solo in the history of rock. Next is another record that I had talked about before in my records that were inspired by tragedy. This record was inspired by the tragedy of the original creative force behind Pink Floyd essentially losing his mind to drugs and to mental illness and having to be fired from the band. So the aforementioned David Gilmour is brought in as an incredible guitarist and creative force. And the bulk of this album is a song that is dedicated to Syd Barrett, who was kicked out of the band just prior to this. It is Shine On You Crazy Diamond, and the album starts with it and finishes with it. And the one I'm putting in this is the first part. So it is the opening track on Pink Floyd, Wish You Were Here, Shine On You Crazy Diamond. And David Gilmour's guitar work is just stunning on that. The next one, big guilty pleasure right here. Steve Miller Band, Space Intro and Fly Like an Eagle. Not a guitar tour de force, but a keyboard, organ tour de force. Just super fun. The next one is another underappreciated guitarist, Ernie Isley from the Isley Brothers. So Jimi Hendrix, early in his career, played with the Isley Brothers and lived with the Isley Brothers for a time. Ernie Isley, right there, who was good friends with Jimi Hendrix, turns That Lady from a great soul pop song into a killer guitar solo. I think 3 minutes of the 5 or more, 3.5 minutes of the 5 is just him soloing over the verse, chorus, verse. Totally killer. The next one from the stack is another one that I say is a guilty pleasure because of what the band is normally associated with. So this is Chicago Transit Authority, which became Chicago, which became a Peter Cetera love song soaring pop vehicle. But before they were that, they were a killer fusion-y rock band. And this is their first record, and the entire first side is a stunning virtuistic display. It is Introduction, Does Anyone Know What Time It Is, and then Beginnings. And it is some of the best playing and in particular drumming of the era. It's the greatest example I know. It's Daniel Serafine, and his fills are awesome, and they're generally those 1970s kind of triplet fills. It's just so good. It's so good. They're so tight. Incredible band. And the last one is the biggest one. And that is my biggest guilty pleasure. Led Zeppelin, Stairway to Heaven. Yes, when I was growing up, when I was in high school, it was the song that was most often on the radio. It was the song that always topped the greatest songs of all time lists. The guitar solos in this continue to top greatest guitar solos of all time. But it is just everything in here. It's, you know, it's the playing. Obviously, these guys are just the most killer on their instruments. Bonham's drumming in here, while he doesn't have any big solos, his fills and his time are just flawless. And it is truly one of the greatest songs of all time. Maybe you've heard it too many times, but maybe it's been a couple of decades since you sat down and really listened to it. It's worth another listen. It is such a good song. Thank you for indulging me in listening to my favorite Indulgent songs, and I'll see you at the next video. Bye.